Our next speaker is a remarkable individual who, since retiring from the United States Air Force, getting on for almost 50 years ago, has devoted almost all of his life to efforts to unravel this UFO subject. He's travelled all over the world. He's lectured all over the world. He's dealt with some of the most remarkable cases and spoken with some of the most remarkable individuals in UFO folklore. The first time I met Wendelle Stevens was way back in 1989 when we both attended a huge UFO convention in Frankfurt, which was then West Germany. I found him to be a very amiable and charming gentleman, and I knew that he was really down to earth when he and my family enjoyed a Big Mac down in Frankfurt town centre together because we didn't like the hotel meals. What's particularly remarkable about Wendelle is his energy, and I think that will come through loud and clear during the course of the next hour and a half or so. Here is a gentleman who has just reached the ripe old age of 72 years, ladies and gentlemen, but hasn't flinched in his desire, in his willingness to travel here to Cardiff today to share with you some of his knowledge and research. From the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wendelle Stevens.
Well, thank you very much. I am extremely impressed by the audience here today. You know, I hold a conference in Las Vegas every year, and I bring in 20 to 28 speakers, at least 10 of them from other countries around the world, and I'm lucky if I could turn out a crowd of 300. You know, there's over 450 here, and they're all coming from one town. And I draw from the whole United States. And I don't know what that's telling me, but you certainly have a lot more interest in what's going on than our American public in the United States. I've been asked to discuss the Mexican UFO wave, which is the largest UFO wave in the history of the phenomena. We had a big wave in 1954 and 55 over the Iberian Peninsula, and that was quite spectacular. There were hundreds of reports. Lasted a little over a year, into the second year. And then we had smaller waves after that in 1967, 72, 76, 78. There was a wave over the Adriatic. We were not getting reports from other countries outside of the Western world at the time, and so we were only looking at the waves generated in the Western world. And then when China opened up in 1979, and we made contact with the researchers there, we found that they had a very heavy wave in 1980 and 81. They had one in 80 and 81, but they had a big wave in the middle 70s that turned the Chinese people around. There was a time between 1947 when China was closed and 1979 when it was opened up again. There was a time in there when the Russians were serious advisors to the Chinese, furnishing much of their training and their military materiel. And the Russians persuaded the Chinese hierarchy to believe that the UFO phenomena was an American trick, and to turn all of the evidence over to the Russian cadres, and they would solve the problems. The Chinese did this for a long time, and it used to be worth a cadre's head to report a UFO case seriously because he was falling for the American trick. However, there was an underground of people who really knew, who were having the experiences, who were dealing with authorities at the lowest level. There were underground groups of students studying the phenomena. And in China, things developed a little differently from the way they did in the United States. The UFO phenomena grew under metaphysical students and an alternate lifestyle crowd in the United States. It was looked at seriously by scientists, but they denied it. And they were persuaded to do this without risking their public careers. In China, where it was illegal to study UFOs at all, the research was being carried out in the universities by university professors and senior and graduate students in a clandestine and very secret way. And they prepared and hand-copied journals that they circulated during the time that the country was closed. So we found, after it opened up and after we were able to get information from inside, that the phenomena that we considered to be a worldwide condition actually was. That the same things were happening in China that were happening over the Western countries, and we already knew that they were happening over all the oceans and the Arctics, both Arctics, and all the continents of this world. So now we are confronted with a new wave of activity that started basically in 1991, in July of 1991, with the an eclipse of the sun in Mexico. And in preparation for the eclipse, the news people had stationed news crews along the path of the total eclipse shadow. They had them in Baja California. They had them under the Sea of Cortez, which is between Baja California and Mexico proper, even underwater cameras filming things. And then going across the country from Obregon to Mexico City and out over the Yucatan. There was a Mexican news team similar to our 2020 program. It's called 60 Minutes in Mexico, headed by a Mr. Jaime Maussan, who was their star moderator and research investigator. Had 3 teams out, one in the Sea of Cortez, one in Obregon, and one in Mexico City. His team in Mexico City filmed a strange object in the sky during the time of total eclipse. He went on the news with it that night over the local news station. They showed pictures of a gleaming object in the sky at the time of the total eclipse when all the rest of the sky was dark. This object was in a section of clear blue sky with white cumulus clouds around it, and it was just to the right of the eclipsing sun. They published that on the news program, and before the program ended, they had several calls from other people. Amateur videographers with their home video cameras had captured the same object, and they were sending copies to the television station. Those copies came in, and for the next morning news, they put 2 or 3 more sequences on from home cameras. That caused a flood of information to reach the station, so much they set up a separate team to handle it called, I forget the name of it. It was a separate group, I'll think of it in a minute, to deal with the eclipse information, and now it became UFO information. And so they began to respond to the communications. They put more on the newspaper, on the air over the television programs. They published articles in the newspapers. They put pictures on the front pages, which we don't do in the United States. And the crescendo of the activity increased until they were getting scores of reports every day. And in 6 months, they decided to go on the air with a marathon television UFO program, planned to go 6 hours in sequence, back to back, starting at about 10 o'clock at night. They invited me down to that, and it was interesting because during the program we had many other reports called in. By that time they had accumulated over 250 video sequences, video clips, and they had over 120 photographs. We showed some of those on Mexican television. 2 events were filmed while the program was on the air. The program was so well received, and the switchboards continued to be lighted up through the whole 6 hours, that they canceled next program to follow and went a 7th hour into the program, which also resulted in another flood of information pouring into the offices of Televisa. We began working with them at that point to try to find out what sense we could make of all this, because the pictures were very interesting. They crossed the spectrum of UFO phenomena reported elsewhere. There were structured silvery objects in the sky. There were structured lights in the sky. There were amorphous lights, just balls, glowing masses of fire in the sky. There were big ones and small ones. Some seemed to emerge from water, and others seemed to descend into the water and submerge. And so we started collecting this information into a production that we later put out called Masters of Destiny, I believe it was, or something like that. It was a video production. The activity didn't slow down, though. It continued. And a year later, they put on another marathon program, just about a year on the anniversary of the first one. This time they invited a bunch of local investigators from all over Mexico. Each one brought his star investigation to the television station for presentation. And that program was so popular that they extended it an hour again, but they announced at the extension, they announced that they would reserve a theater in town for the next day, which they had telephoned and arranged for, that had 1,100 seats in it, and that people that couldn't get through on the telephone lines to the station could come to the theater and ask questions directly to the people on the program. And they took us all down there the next night for a 3-hour program in the theater starting at 7:30. We got there at 7 o'clock. Actually, the station checked at noon to see how things were going, and all the seats were sold out. 1,100 seats sold. And other people were trying to buy tickets. We went there at 7 o'clock. The seats were all occupied. Others were trying to buy tickets. There was about 800 people outside of the theater milling around trying to buy tickets. And when we went inside, they pulled the doors off the theater and let themselves in. Now that's interest. That's the kind of interest they get in Mexico. And those tickets were $15 a head, and that's a lot of money in Mexico. So the Mexican government does not suppress the information as ours does, and maybe yours too. They publish leading case reports on the front pages of their newspaper. They review cases in their magazines, and they also put them on television. And the Mexicans are probably better informed per capita than any other country in the world today, and their activity is still the heaviest we know of in any single concentrated location. So what I brought is a selection of pictures from Mexico. There's a lot of pictures that are just moving lights in the sky, little points of light. A lot of pictures are not very clear. They're always taken, or almost always taken, with cheap cameras under poor conditions of lighting, with motion, with cameras that have slow speed shutters. But we can still pick out of that group, we can pick out quite a few very interesting pictures. Now, we'll go through these here in one by one here, but this is a map of Mexico here, and the area of activity runs across the Mexican area there from the northwest through Mexico City to the southwest. Now, there's other sightings all over the place, but that's the heaviest concentration of activity, and it involves the 3 active volcanoes have become active again now, Mount Popocatépetl and its 2 smaller neighbors. And one has to wonder if the extraterrestrials are aware of some catastrophic events before they happen, because we've had UFOs reported before most of the major earthquakes and before most of the very serious and dangerous eruptions. And so they're being reported in that vicinity now, and we're going to go to some of those slides. Now this is as I say, is a picture of Mexico. I'm going to go to a little bit of an enlargement here, and that'll show you almost the area that we're going to talk about. They're going to all be concentrated pretty much in that area. They're right in this, all these little towns that I will mention, you will find on this map here. Now this is a picture, to give you some comparison, is a picture of the moon taken with an ordinary 35 millimeter camera, and that's the size you see the moon as. So using that as a kind of a yardstick, anything that's bigger than the object, well, thought I had the pointer, but I guess I didn't. Anything that's bigger than the moon rising over the sand dune there is going to be visually bigger than that to the photographer when he took the picture. This first picture now is kind of a lead-in to the events that started in 1991. This one was taken on the 31st of March of 1978 at Monterrey, New Mexico, by Mr. Francesco Rivera, riding his motorcycle back to work from a photo assignment for his newspaper. And he stopped at a red light, and before the light changed, the man behind him started honking his horn and waving his hands, and he looked back, and the man was pointing over his head, and he looked up and saw that. So he unstrapped the camera on the back of his motorcycle and got that picture before the light changed. Well, the light changed and he blocked all traffic, but before it changed again, and the thing flew away. That was in Monterrey, Mexico. This one was taken over El Chico, Hidalgo, in the summer of 1978 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A family called Rodriguez were on a field trip at El Chico when they selected the place they liked, and they were surprised to find the flight of a UFO that had been disturbed by their presence. It rose out of the scrub nearby and hovered for a few moments. They were able to snap 2 pictures with their camera, and then it sped off at high speed. It flew away. This is an enlargement of the same picture to give you an idea that it is a structured object in the sky. This next picture was taken over San Luis Potosí, Mexico, on the 19th of November 1979 at 10:30 in the evening, by Mr. Luis Lozano Andolan, and his nephew had gone to the church to take pictures at night. And they saw this object hovering in the sky in a position where there was no moon. Now, if you remember the comparison we had, this is at least visually twice the size of the moon. So they took pictures of that, and it flew away. And then the nephew saw another object in the sky, 2 objects together, over a distant part of the city, and he turned his camera and snapped this black and white picture. This next one is the beginning of a series taken in Culiacan, Mexico, in 1979 in the early morning. This began at that time with a young man, a mechanic I believe he was, seeing strange objects in the sky, moving objects at night, lighted, and it came closer and closer each time he saw it, until he prepared a camera and waited. He saw it when he had the camera, and he took that picture, and then he took this next one, which is a blow-up. It would have been smaller without the enlargement, but you can see some trees in the lower back foreground there. Changed his film and took another picture. This is what it looked like when we printed it in high contrast to reduce the amount of glow around it. It was clearly a lens-shaped object. It was a glowing mass. If it was structured, the structure was underneath the corona there. This case continued to develop. The man he met it on the ground. It landed in front of him when he was trying to take pictures with a video camera. He walked up to it. He met the occupants. They were humans, like us. And they told him they came from, of all places, the Pleiades. His contacts, he felt so awed in the presence of these alien humans from the Pleiades, but he was impressed by their apparent power. He was also impressed by their superior knowledge, by their bearing, by their very presence, he felt vastly inferior to them. And he even cried in their presence. And they told him that he was a worthy man and that he didn't need to feel inferior, that they were just like us, but a little more advanced than we were at the present time. And his contacts continued, and his neighbors even saw the ships, and they saw him taking pictures. He wanted to introduce his wife to them, and they said they had no objection, and they allowed him to bring his wife to a contact. And then they took him and his wife aboard the craft together and showed them around. He had a 12-year-old son that was terrified of the craft and the events, but he finally got it. Now the principal contactee and his wife and his 16-year-old son now meet these individuals from the Pleiades. The ship appears to him to be a plasma shape, or a luminous cloudy mass, but when he's inside, everything is structured just like in this room here. He took a number of pictures in that first sequence. He's only allowed us to use one. These contacts, as I said, began in 1979. He came to us with the first pictures he allowed, and the first time he allowed the story out of his own private family group during the Marathon Congress over television in Mexico City in 1993. And he had been keeping this to himself all this time because each contact seemed like a peculiarly intense religious experience to him. And he thought it was too sacred to share with anybody else, even outsiders in the family that were not in the immediate family, and he had told no researchers or nobody else. His story is now being prepared for release on a bigger scale, but it's a remarkable story, and they told him, shared a great deal of information with him. Here's the ship again from another angle. Here is a picture taken one time when he was in his car when they approached. He sat in the car, picked up his camera, and shot this picture through the windshield. You see the reflection of the object in the shiny paint of the hood of his car through the windshield as he snapped this picture. Now you can imagine how big this appeared to him at the time if you think back to the little picture of the moon over the sand dune. This is 100 times the size of the apparent size of the moon at night. Another picture from the same series. Another picture. Here it hovered overhead, and he took a bottom picture of the object, revealed some detail to the bottom that is similar in some respects to the detail from the bottom of a craft photographed by Ed Walters over a Gulf breeze some years ago. Here's a picture taken by a friend of a man and his wife and child were going across Chicosan Reservoir near Tuxtla Gutierrez on the 21st of March, 82, to have a picnic on the island. The island was famous for its scenic beauty and for certain vegetation that grew there, and they were going to have a picnic at that point. A friend wanted to take a picture of them before they boarded the boat, the launch, and this thing was noticed in the sky, appeared in the same picture. Here's a picture taken over Palenque, Mexico, on the 21st of March, 1991. Now remember, this is still part of the build-up to the major events that began with the eclipse. This was taken by young Alejandro Autry, walking near the pre-Columbian ruins of Palenque, when he unexpectedly encountered this object moving from behind the trees, moving from his left to his right as he took the picture. And he only got the one picture, and by the time he overcame his surprise and prepared his camera to take another picture, it zipped away at high speed and was gone. This next picture was taken over Puebla de Los Angeles by a young man who declines identification, and we call him Louis N. This was taken in May of 1991. Young Louis N. was in the habit of waking up in a reverie state. Between sleeping and waking, he would hear voices that would tell him to go to a certain part of his small city of Puebla de Los Angeles. It's probably no more than 20,000 people at the most. And he would take a cousin or a friend or a relative because he never wanted to go alone. And he would go there, and as soon as he arrived and got out of his car with his camera, the object would appear. And then he noticed that the object did not fly in from anywhere or come from anywhere. It seemed to be coming straight at him, straight on, until it was a full structured object in front, moving slowly that he could take pictures of. And it seemed to go away so fast it just shrunk to a point and disappeared. We've had these kind of reports over the history of this phenomena, this apparent high-speed approach and then high-speed departure that looks like a spot grows suddenly to full scale and then dims down and goes away again. And he finally concluded that they're not coming from anywhere in a linear sense as you and I think of travel, that they isolate a point in space and then begin to emerge from an other reality until they're fully dimensional in our own space-time reality. And they interact with him and the objects around them just like any other object in our field of living. And when they leave, they transcend the same way. They just start to shrink and become vaporous until they're a little point that disappears and is gone. Now, this is a little bit new to our science of physics because we don't know exactly how this happens. But this is not the only case. It just happens to be a representative case in Mexico of this kind of phenomena. And this young Louis N. has taken 6 series of pictures of these craft involving 4 different spacecraft in the series. Here you see it over the airport control tower at his small town there at Puebla de Los Angeles in Puebla State of Mexico. And here you see it's a little closer, and he's shooting over part of the tower building. Remember, it's a very small town, a small airplane, only got one building on the airport, and that's it. And the object is hovering right over the control tower. Here's a blow-up of it to give you an idea what that one looked like. It's a structured object that is reasonably similar to one of the pictures taken by Edward Meier. And this man never heard of Edward Meier. So he had his cousin with him, and he asked his cousin to take a picture of him in the same scene with the object, and he went and sat on a cement wall there while his cousin stepped back and snapped this picture. That's Louis N. from the back of his head. This picture was taken over at Atlixco, Puebla. This is the 7th of July now, 1991. The eclipse is going to happen on the 11th. 4 days before that, at 8 o'clock in the evening, 4 judicial police. We call them U.S. Marshals in our country. They call them judicial police there. I don't know what you call them here, but they were 4 police officers traveling in 2 vehicles from Atlixco to Puebla. Puebla is the capital of Puebla State. When they were surprised at about 17 kilometer marker by a flying light of a strange color which was coming right at them. Then the light stopped, gave a turn, and flew away toward the mountains. The mountains are Mount Popocatépetl and its 2 smaller neighbors, volcanic mountains. The comandante of the team ordered Pepe, their official police photographer, to get a picture of the object quick because they thought it might be contrabandistas. And he wanted to get a picture and then try to develop it out to get the number of the aircraft so they could trace it the next day. Pepe snapped the one picture and it quickly flew away. He developed it out and brought this back to the chief of the team at the Judicial Police Headquarters there in Puebla. And the police officer says, "What's this?" And the photographer says, "That's what I photographed last night." And nobody could explain it. It's an object apparently with windows around the side. Certainly doesn't look like an airplane. Doesn't look like a balloon. It flew at high speed. It stopped and hovered, moved at slower speeds, then speeded up and zipped away. But that was the first picture taken of this object in this UFO wave. There's another picture. It's another print of the same thing. It's a little denser to allow you to see the windows a little better. Now the next picture was taken. This is the beginning of the eclipse of the sun pictures. This is one of the first ones taken at Ciudad Obregón on the 11th of July, 1991 at 13:25 by engineer Pablo Hernandez Trevino. He snapped a number of pictures of the eclipsing sun, and he got these images, if you can see the object in the picture there, with it. I think there's a small object that moves around it. And this next picture, also taken at Ciudad Obregón, was given, he was given this picture by another party who had taken it at the same time, the same day. And he turned it in with the group. Now here's a picture taken also at Ciudad Obregón. Same day, same time. Another picture given to engineer Hernandez Trevino, who, after he snapped the pictures, he started telling people about the remarkable pictures he got, and others who had taken pictures began giving them to him. And he collected about 4 sets and brought them to OVNI magazine in Mexico City. This is the second series that was given to him, taken at Ciudad Obregón, midday. And it clearly shows a blue disc-shaped mass of light in the clouds, partly obscuring, in the clouds that were partly obscuring the eclipsing sun. I'll point out the blue disc, and then you can watch for it in the other. This blue disc of light changed position with respect to the eclipsing sun as the eclipse was taking place. There you can see it's a little higher. And here you see it's still a little higher. And then that's the end of that one. There was a 4th set of pictures also brought to Mr. Hernandez, and this is the first one, taken at the same time in the same place. Set of 3 pictures showing a reddish ball of light in the sky in the direction of the eclipsing sun. Move it to be sure we can find a small red ball right here. Watch that. That changed position during the eclipse of the sun. There's even a 4th set of pictures that came out of that series. This is not Obregón now. This is Mexico City, taken by a newspaper delivery man in the south part of the city. Was watching the eclipsing sun when he saw another light come in from below, and he aimed his camera at the sun and captured this anomalous radiant object as it approached the apparent position of the sun. There's number 2. Here's number 3. You can see that it's moving with respect to the sun. I guess I only put 3 of them in there. This next one was taken at Ciudad Valles, San Luis Potosí, on 12th of August, 1991 at 3:20 in the afternoon by a friend of this family who was taking a picture of the wife and captured a glowing orange-yellow ball of light surrounded by a red corona. The photographer did not see this at the time. Is it? Okay. The ball of light does not come out too well in this in reproduction, but in the original picture it was quite orange, and the red glow extended farther than you can see in this development here. But that was the first of a series of pictures involving this strange reddish orange ball of light surrounded by a brilliant red corona that were taken, and we're coming up on a few more here. And I don't know what they are. They may be monitoring devices of some kind. They may be sondes. They may be almost anything. But I'm doing this in sequence now to try to keep the thing in a little bit of order. We'll come back to some more of those red balls of light. But this picture is the second picture of what appears to be the object photographed by the judicial police officers. This was taken at Zacatelco, Mexico, in September of 1991. This is now July to September, 3 months later, and the object is at a different orientation so that the windows appear to be horizontal to you. If the object tilted down in your direction, you would see that it had the same curve as the other ones. This was taken during the development of the wave by a man who declines identification in this case, and he delivered this to the group at Televisa that were collecting the information on the wave. Here's another picture in the same series taken by the same man. I think there's only two there. But there was another picture taken. Let me back that up. That was a third picture. Here's the one taken by the man that desires anonymity. And this is a third picture of the same object taken actually at a different time. This is 31 October 1991, taken by Dr. Carlos Perez and Professor Olkeen, both of Zacatelco, who saw this object flying at low level over the city, got out of their car and took this one picture of the object. And again, it resembles the one before this, taken at the same place, and the one taken by the four judicial police officers. If you tilted, you'd have very much the same image. This next one was photographed over Lake Chapala, near Guadalajara, by a Senor Julio Orozco Ceja, who went to the window and looked out at the precise moment that he saw this UFO passing, snapped it through the window, grabbed his 35mm camera and snapped it through the window, and succeeded in getting this one picture. The interesting thing about this picture is the shape and size, and there were 4 visible light spots around the dome here, just above the rim flange on this picture, making the image identical to one that was photographed over Iran about a year before this. This object was seen by other witnesses, who did not get pictures of it, to emerge from Lake Chapala and fly away. Other witnesses had reported seeing it approach Lake Chapala, descend at a steep angle, enter the water without a splash, and disappear. Lake Chapala is only about 300 feet deep at its deepest point, but the residents that live around there are convinced that the object has some kind of an operating base under their lake. Maybe we can see the light spots around the dome here a little bit better here. Can you make them out right there? This is a developing flaw. The light spots were around the rim right there. And this, the one photographed over Iran, had the same light spots around the dome. There's the one that was photographed over Iran. It's a reversed image. That's a negative image of the same thing, but if you saw it reversed so that it was black, in a light sky, you'd have almost an identical image. Okay, this next one looks very much like one of the ships photographed by Edward Meier. in Switzerland. The one that photographed over in Iran also was in 1991, by the way, just a few months difference. This one was photographed over Tulancingo in Hidalgo State of Mexico on the 15th of June of 1992 at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Senor Hector Carranza heard a strange sound and looked out and saw this object in flight over his home. He snapped 3 good color photographs of it before it got away. A similar object was photographed by an airline pilot. We haven't been able to get the picture yet. This is another of Mr. Carranza's photos. And a third one with a lower visual angle of the bottom. There's a crop of the picture showing that it has the typical 3 hemispherical structures on the underside and a pronounced cupola on the top of a biconvex metallic object. This, there's a greater enlargement if it helps any. This next picture was taken over Puebla, Mexico, again by a Mr. Hugo Perez. And I believe we have another one of these red objects. Now, here again, in reduction, you always lose red in reproduction. So every time you reproduce a red image, it loses more red. This red glow around there was quite pronounced, like this, before we reduced it. And the center was a yellow-orange mass it reproduces pretty good, but the red glow doesn't come out. So that's, we don't know what it is. It's a small object in the sky. It's another one of those, what we are now calling some kind of SONs. Need the other device here to move the slide. Okay. Here's another series of pictures taken by Luis N. again. This series was taken on the 8th of December of 1992 by Luis N. And you can see that it's about the same shape as the other one that we showed you. He actually photographed 4 different types of objects. Here's an enlargement of that one. And here's another picture taken by Luis N. on another date, on the 10th of December, when he took 3 sets of pictures on the 10th of December. One in the center of town where this was taken, one on the highway to the airport, and one over the airport. This is an enlargement of the same thing. You can see that it's a slightly different type from the one before. It has a higher dome, no hemispherical spheres on the bottom, had a row of glowing lights around the rim flange. Here's one taken over Teotihuacan, and I always have trouble pronouncing that. Teotihuacan, Mexico, on the 15th of January, 1993, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, by a Dr. Eduardo Garcia Covarrubias on vacation with his family at Teotihuacan. They took 6 pictures of this object moving about over the city. Here's another picture taken over ruins, a famous site there. This was taken by the son of a family that had gone on vacation. They don't like their names mentioned, to the pyramid, and the family is climbing the pyramid there, and the son tried to get a picture of them climbing. He's a 12-year-old boy holding a camera, going to get pictures of the family going up. He got this picture, and here, again, is the luminous yellow-orange center surrounded by a glowing corona, red. We don't know what that means. We don't even know how big this one was. It showed up large in the photograph, just like you see it there. And then the family came down from the pyramid, and they went on to something else, doing something else, and he snapped another picture over another feature of the ruins in that center there, and he got another object, different from the first one. And we don't know what that was. This picture was taken by the father or stepfather of Hilda Martinez, who had gone up on the roof of the house to water some plants up there. In Mexico, they grow vegetation, plants and gardens on the roof of the house. She'd gone up to water the plants on the top of the house when she saw this object hovering over their garden. And it was not very big. It was she estimated it to be about 8 to 10 feet in diameter. That's not big for a UFO. And it was very close. And she went back down the stairs screaming for her stepfather to come up there. He was inside. He grabbed a camera and went back up with her in time to get this picture and 2 more before it flew away. Here's the second one. Oh, I didn't put the third one in here. Okay. This next one is a very interesting one again. It was taken at Ocotlán, Jalisco, Mexico on the 24th of April, 1993 at 6 o'clock in the evening by a photographer by the name of Lopez. And there had been a number of reports of objects like this over the city of Ocotlán, which is near Lake Chapala and Guadalajara also. And he had seen it himself, and he'd seen it twice. And he noticed that it was always either early in the morning or late in the evening that he saw it. So he began carrying a camera with him when he went to walk his dog. And he was on the skirts of Mount Chiquijutilo at 6 o'clock in the morning when he saw the object finally again, and he is prepared. He has his camera with him. It was hovering in the air some 50 meters away. He raised his camera and snapped this picture, rolled the film, and got another picture. You see the lights around the dome are changing. There's different ones illuminated here. Here's the first one again. We have one dark window, if they're windows. Then the lights moved around. We have more illuminated. It looks like a dark one is on the left side here as you look at it. He got another picture with 2 lights, windows out, whatever they are, and one from the bottom looking up before it flew away. This is the last of it as it was leaving, and he got a final shot of it. There's an enlargement of the one with the 2 windows out. And here we move on to another series taken over Mexico City Federal District by a photographer who declines identification. And we'll move on because I want to get to this next one, which was very interesting because they were on their Mexican independence holiday, and a squadron of F-5 jet fighters was flying parade formation for the audience below. And a police officer controlling traffic noticed this object in the sky. He started to photograph it, and he saw that the jet fighter was going towards it. So he waited until they were all in the scene together and snapped this one picture. He gave the picture to OVNI magazine. He wanted them to withhold his name for professional reasons. But during that same parade, there were other people with home video cameras that snapped video images of the object passing through a formation of F-5 jet fighters. Then another sequence showed helicopters, a formation of 9 helicopters, and the object passed through the formation of helicopters. And then the helicopters came around again. It made one more pass through the helicopters. Then one of the jet fighters was detached from the formation by the flight commander and sent to chase the thing off, and he headed towards it. He was going to try to get a closer look, and the thing speeded up and went up at a very steep angle and disappeared from the sight of everybody. The jet fighter looked like it was standing still as the object outdistanced it, climbing away. This one was photographed in Colony, Santa Barbara, Corregidora, on the 24th of October, 93, at 6:30 in the evening, showing this picture was taken through the window of this gentleman's home as he was looking at Mr. Martinez Cabrera, and it flew away, but another object appeared, a dark object, and he snapped a picture of it. And they appeared to be associated because they were there within seconds of each other, but it also flew away, and he didn't get any more. Now here's another picture taken of a man riding a horse in León, Guanajuato, Mexico, Hector Ramirez. And a friend of his was going to take a picture of him on the horse, and here we have this funny little yellow-orange ball of light surrounded by a red corona appeared in the same picture. Nobody there ever saw anything like that at the time. Here's another one taken from over at Lixco, Puebla. At Lixco is where the 4 judicial police officers had their experience and photographed the object. This man had heard so many stories of UFO reports that he went to Lixco with his own camera and was going to sit there and wait for something to happen. He got there and pitched a little pup tent and get ready to wait them out. And he no more than got the pup tent erected and got his camera ready when he turned around and saw that object hovering between him and the lower slopes of Mount Popocatépetl, which is out of the scene to the right there. Here's an interesting one. This is at Zitácuaro, Michoacan State, taken on the 10th of February, 1994, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. A man who declines identification living there in the area saw this metallic disc-shaped object hovering over the reservoir, got his camera ready and snapped a picture. It hovered for several minutes, and then it went out over the middle of the reservoir, began a steep descent at about a 45-degree angle, entered the water without a splash, and disappeared. We, in the investigation of that case, we looked for other witnesses, and it turned out that almost everybody that lived around the reservoir had seen these objects at one time or another, either in the air, hovering, moving, going towards the reservoir, coming away from the reservoir, and they turned up at least 4 people who had seen it visibly enter the water and disappear, or come out of the water and fly away. So one might conclude that there is some kind of a facility underwater in the reservoir. It's a fairly deep reservoir, but it's not over 100 feet deep. And those events have happened. There are several series of pictures that have come from that area and that same reservoir. Here's a man who lives at Ocotlan, again, Jalisco, near Guadalajara, who had seen this object several times before this, and he was riding in a station wagon in the back with other people when they saw it again, and it was following the station wagon. And he says, "That's the same thing I saw before out here." He said, "Stop the car, I want to get out and take a picture of it." He had his camera with him. He was going to Mexico City. They stopped the station wagon, and he got out to take this picture. He snapped 2 more. There was another station wagon stopped on the other side of the highway, and he took a picture. One of the pictures showed a little bit of the other wagon in the picture. If we have the whole picture here, we'd see more of the station wagon. But there were other observers stopped watching the same thing at the same time as he snapped the picture. Here's another print he snapped 2 pictures, this second picture. Here's another photographer, entirely different from Jose Perez, that snapped the one over the mountain, the one with the lights all around the rim. This was taken near Chilcota, Michoacan province. Michoacan is the province that holds Guadalajara and Lake Chapala. This is Senor Gonzalez. Was able to take one photograph of this object, which he observed for himself. He knew nothing about the other set of pictures that were taken, never heard of them, but this is the one that he saw and photographed, and he turned it over to the group of people at Televisa that were collecting the pictures of the event, making up a history of the wave. Here's a picture that was photographed over Ocotlan, Jalisco, an object in the air by Alejandro Bacco, who was aboard a small aircraft when he encountered this object at 5,000 kilometers altitude in the sky. Snapped this one picture of the alien object from his airplane in flight. Here's another picture taken at Tegucingo, Puebla, Mexico, by Hector Ramirez and his daughter and her boyfriend. They were driving in a car, and at a place between Acatlan and Puebla, the boy wanted to stop to relieve himself. And the girl wanted to fool him by pretending to take his picture as he was behind the tree here, and she quickly aimed the camera, telling him she was taking a picture of him, snapped it, didn't see this, but this came out in the developed picture. The boy's behind the tree and the car's parked over here on the side of the road. Another one of those strange things, which means that the phenomena is real, or very likely real. We still don't know what it is. It may be some kind of a sonde or some kind of an investigation device or a perceiving device, perhaps. We have many reports of these things. They come in this goldish orange color with a red corona around them. Some have had a green corona around them. Some of them are green luminous balls of light. Some are blue. They have been observed to come through walls into a room, interact with the people there, and go through the walls and disappear again. It's fairly commonly reported in this society here. Yeah, we can change the carousel now. So the Mexican wave is still going on. I'll show you a few more pictures. Then I brought some other pictures here that are very unique that we might be interested in, that I'll show you because they're one of a kind. If I can get this all organized, get it all organized here again. Okay, this is Guadalajara. The editor, am I on here? The editor of OVNI magazine, hearing about recent reports near Guadalajara, had chartered a private airplane to take her out to look over the section of highway between Lake Chapala and Guadalajara where so many events were being reported, and where the pictures were taken by the man that got out of the station wagon, and where pictures were taken of the object that descended into Lake Chapala and disappeared. And they're in the rented airplane, and the instruments started going all haywire. They lost fix. And as they looked out around them, she saw this off the right wingtip of the chartered airplane. She took the one picture of it. They were all so frightened, they asked the pilot to get him out of there, and he made a steep turn and flew away, and the object apparently did not follow them. But that was an unexpected development. Now here's another one of those sondes, or whatever they are, sonde or whatever it is, if we can call it. I haven't any idea. It's the yellow-orange ball of light surrounded by the red corona. Here you can see this. The girl's mother is withdrawing from something. She doesn't know what. She has not seen the object. The photographer didn't see the object, but they sensed something present there at the time. That's 29 May 1994. Here's one taken over Zacatendo in Michoacan province, Mexico. Senor Hector Salvador Olmos, lying on a cot outside of his house. You can't see his feet here, but he was laying on a cot with his feet towards the mountain. When he saw this object slowly approaching, he had his camera on a little bench beside him there, a little table. And as it got closer and closer, he reached over and got the camera, slowly prepared it and aimed it, and took this one photograph of the object as it passed by. It's clearly a circular domed, disc-shaped object. This one was taken over the Federal District of Mexico City by a commercial television camera team. One of the regular news camera teams had two objects in the sky they followed for some time. The objects were quite distant and they didn't get very good images, but they were there. Here's another picture from the same sequence. This one was taken by a professional photographer, near Puerto Vallarta. He was walking down the sidewalk. He had shot all but one frame on a roll of film, and he was looking for something to shoot a picture of, and he thought he would shoot those palm trees in front of the neighboring hotel. He just raised his camera, snapped a picture of the palm trees, went back in and developed out the roll of film, and when it was printed, he saw this object in the picture. He didn't know what it was. He didn't see it. It is not a film flaw. It's not a scratch in the emulsion. Whatever it is, it's registered in the emulsion layers as a structured object in the picture. Here's an interesting series of pictures taken over the Basilica de Guadalupe in Mexico City on 17 July 1994, 6 o'clock in the evening. The family has just come out of an early evening mass, and they're walking towards their car when they hear a strange buzzing sound. Looking up, they saw this object moving around over the dome of the basilica. And they had a young man with them who had a camera in the car, and he went and got it and came back and started taking pictures. He snapped the whole roll of pictures of this object maneuvering over the top of the Basilica de Guadalupe in Mexico City that evening. Remarkable pictures. Strange object. It's not a weather balloon. It's nothing that they could account for. Now, this is an interesting picture from the series down there of it was taken at Camembaro in Guanajuato, which is near Mexico City, by young Arturo Romero's father. The boy his father was in the house doing something, working at something. The boy was out in the yard, and he saw the object again. He had seen it a number of times before, and he'd reported it to his father. And he said, Father, my friend is out here again. Get the camera and come take our picture. And the father took the camera, went outside. The boy was standing in the yard. The object was hovering over his shoulder, and he snapped that one picture with his young son and the UFO in the background. Here's an enlargement of the same picture showing the object in a little more detail. It's clearly a structured metallic object. This picture was taken at night at Acambaro, Guanajuato, by the same father who had taken the picture of the boy, but this time the father saw the object in the sky at night, and he took this picture of it, and it developed out on the same roll of film. But this one he clearly saw as he snapped the picture also. Oops, that's wrong. This next picture is from Zitacuaro again, which is the reservoir at Michoacan. This is an entirely different series of pictures from the one I showed you before. This is going to be a series of 3 pictures of the same object that comes out of the water, flies around over the big reservoir there, and goes back into the water again. There's another, that's number 2. I think we got 3 pictures in this series here of that object. Now, this next picture was taken over Hidalgo, Michoacan, which is not too far away, by Jaime Cardenas, when he and 2 neighbors saw the object, and he went in and got a camera and came out and took the pictures. This one it's another one of those pictures showing the small red, the yellow object with a red corona around it. Some kind of a sonde, we believe. Here's one taken that also came out of a reservoir and went back into it. This is at Metepec. It's at a place called Los Azufres, which means sulfur springs, by a woodcutter. And there had been a number of reports of unusual activity in the area. And this man had taken a camera to work with him, and he saw the object in the sky and was watching it when he saw a truck come down from the hills that had a load of wood on it. And the police guard on the truck jumped off but asked to see what he was doing there, saw the dark object, and he handed the camera to the police officer who was a forest guard, who took the pictures for him, took 4 pictures on the man's camera, gave it back to him. There's number 2. Here's number 3. Oh, that's a different one. Okay, I didn't put the 4th one in. All right, this one was taken over in Monterrey, Mexico, in 31 March 1978. I just put it in here because it's another unusual one. And we're getting down to the unusual pictures that I wanted to show you, taken by UFO observers. This is El Chico, Hidalgo, Mexico. A family, Rodriguez, on a field trip, saw that. This was taken at San Luis Potosi, Mexico, by Luis Lozano Andalan and his nephew. The interesting thing about this one is it looks like it's almost transparent, but it's reflecting light from it. It's a semi-solid structured object, I guess one would have to say. And I have one here taken over Culiacan recently by Carlos Diaz, who saw this big luminous object in the sky, and he began to photograph it. And he got 2 pictures. This is from the television. Oops, I'll back it up to give you a little better view of that. This is from the television reproduction of the pictures that appeared on Mexican television. There it is. Okay. This is just a moving light at night, an object. There's a lot of those. There's a lot of these small dark objects in the sky. This is an interesting one because it's hovering right over the central communications antenna of a major communications system for Mexico City. And the man snapped a picture of it as it hovered over the central. Here's another picture taken at the same time by the same man of a similar object. And here's one that was just recently photographed in 1995 near Mexico City by a man who took this picture. You can see that it's a circular object with some kind of luminous phenomena underneath, a dome on the top. Here's, okay, we didn't put the second picture in. Now, here's the strange pictures coming up. This is apparently a moving ball of light. The photographer did not see this one when he photographed it. This was taken over Mount Rainier. That's Mount Rainier in Washington State that is now swelling, and the seismologists say it's preparing itself for a major explosive eruption. This picture was taken by an Italian scuba. He was an underwater photographer off the Azores Islands looking for underwater scenes on assignment. He went down about 7:30 in the morning. He came up about 8 o'clock to look around, to go back to the ship and get ready with his gear, when he saw this object hovering just above the wave tops. And he had a small 35 millimeter camera with him, and he snapped that one picture. Then he dove under because he didn't know what it was, and it was about 5 feet in diameter. It looked pretty big, and it appeared threatening, and it was low overhead, and he went underwater to swim away from it and come up and get a better look. And as he was swimming away, he looked to the side, and he saw that it's now underwater with him, swimming alongside of him. He went back to the surface. It came to the surface with him, rose into the air, and passed over his head. And he snapped this picture, looking at it from the underside. And he said he could see what looked like a small television screen in the bottom that had images changing on it. Now this began in the air. It followed him underwater, followed him to the surface again, got back in the air and hovered over him. It's an object that is clearly trifibious. It could fly in the air, it could move on the surface and move under the surface. Really a strange object. Here's a picture that was taken by a motorcyclist going from a ski resort to his home in Colorado. And he saw this phenomena, and he stopped and unsnapped the camera from the back of his motorcycle and took this one picture of clearly a structured, domed, circular object shooting lightning strokes from there to the ground. The next day, a forest fire was reported in the area that got so big before they got it out, it killed 3 firemen putting the fire out and burned hundreds of acres of timber. This is an old picture taken over Diamond Head, Hawaii, way back in the 50s. First color image of it we've seen. It just turned up recently. Oh, okay, here, I put a couple of these in here. I've had questions asked about Gulf breeze, what's happening now. And this is from a recent set of pictures that were delivered anonymously to one of the researchers in the Gulf breeze area by a man who said that he was a tourist from Florida, or from Alabama, that had seen this event, taken the pictures. He didn't want to be identified. He didn't want his name known. He sent the negatives and the prints, the first prints from the pictures to the researcher there. We have no information other than that. We don't know how legitimate they are. It's a very interesting and beautiful picture. 15 minutes after the sequence with this B-1 bomber, it is, 15 minutes after the sequence with the B-1 bomber, a helicopter entered the scene, photographed by a second group of people at a convenience store along the beach. And this is one of the pictures from that series. The object appears to be the same object. The craft are different craft. The scenery in the foreground, the trees and so forth, seem to be similar trees. So that's all we know about the pictures. We have no positive way of verifying the legitimacy of it. They were both turned in by photographers who insisted on remaining anonymous, and they mailed them in letters, in envelopes, with no return address on the corner and no way to find out who they were. We still don't know. Here's another picture taken by a friend of mine, Mike Hawkins, over Gulf Breeze, though. And this object first appeared high in the sky as a little dark object, just a little dark object moving in and out among the clouds. He snapped 3 pictures of it that way, went in, laid his camera down, and washed up for supper. And as he was washing up, his wife called from the kitchen and said, "Mike, they're out here again." He went back, grabbed the camera, and went out and took the rest of the roll, 8 pictures of that object maneuvering over his house in Gulf Breeze. It's clearly a circular, structured object with a semi-transparent or translucent dome on it. This next one is a series of pictures taken. We've got that one upside down. I knew I'd bound to do it. This is a picture, if you can invert it in your mind, of a dome disc in the lower left-hand corner, which would be the lower left-hand corner, and a stealth bomber making a pass on it. Maybe we got one right side up here. There, the stealth bomber is passing now, and you can see that it was coming around, taking a look at this dome disc, or apparently taking some kind of reading on it. And then the stealth bomber circled again and then flew away. Here's another picture taken by Ed Walters. This is from a television screen. He took it on a television camera, live television, of an object that he watched moving over the water and coming towards him. And then he saw an F-14 jet fighter apparently vectored in on the object by air traffic control, and it's now passing between Ed Walters' video camera and the object. You can see that they are eclipsing each other. The jet fighter is this side of the object, and the object has to be at least as big as the jet fighter. The jet fighter is 76 feet long. That's one of the recent ones taken by Ed Walters, and that concludes the photographic images. And I would, at this point, be willing to take any questions on any subject that I'm familiar with. I know that you all know that I've done a lot of research on the Meier case and a number of other cases, and we can talk about anything that you have in mind. This was the picture show presentation for this particular meeting this time, so let's go on from there. If somebody wants to turn up the lights out here. And how are we doing on time?
We're doing fine.
Okay.
If you want to do the questions a bit later.
Oh, okay. You want to do that?
We'll show the people the video footage that we're going to show them earlier.
Oh, okay. You want to do that? Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wendelle Stevens.
Thank you, Wendelle.
Thank you, Wendelle. We will